Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Talking Stick Show. So, I'd like to welcome my co host. We have Laura Massey. Hello, Laura.
Hi, Dale. Hi, everyone. Hi, Tim.
Hiya.
Hello. I'd like to welcome Tim Walter to the show this week. Hello, Tim.
Hello. Thank you for having me on. Nice to meet both of you.
And nice to meet you. So, I came across your material and your channel on YouTube a while ago, actually, and I was watching various videos, and I was really intrigued how I'd say authentic you are with the work, and it was really interesting. Some of the videos which I've watched about dowsing, about the earth energies, and many different kind of spiritual aspects to it. So, would you like to tell the listeners a bit about yourself, Tim?
Yeah, okay, thanks. Gosh, yes. Well, I'm glad that you found it interesting. Obviously, I mean that's the main thing. The YouTube channel is a little portal to my world, if you like. And what I do on there is to share my spiritual experiences with the world, so that very simply, with just a simple bit of little bit of metal, like a can't speak.
Those
Wonderful.
bendy bits of metal. Yes.
So a simple little bit of metal, like a coat hanger. You can just get a coat hanger and click it and cut it into and have a little right angle bend, and you can use that as a dowsing rod. And what I talk about on the YouTube channel is about dowsing and the way that we can use our intuition to actually access a heck of a lot of spiritual type information from the world around us. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes of background to me. So basically, if we'd been speaking sort of 35, 40 years ago, I would have been in the corporate world up to my eyeballs, massively stressed by running conferences and making video productions for companies and all this sort of thing, working for companies like JCB and working for financial companies, for heaven's sake, in the city of London, and this sort of just completely different world. What happened was in 1998, my wife and I and our two lads, we moved house. We moved over from the southeast of England over to the Welsh borders over here in the UK. And in that simple act of just moving house, we moved into a house that actually we discovered, long story short, we discovered that there was a personality, there was a spirit of a lady living in that house. And she spent some time gently trying to get our attention and trying to make us aware that she was there. It finally happened. We made contact with her through some dowsers that came to speak with us and speak with her. And that act of realizing that, oh my gosh, this is a person that died some years ago. We would normally call her a ghost, but there's a whole story behind that takes it into a different realm altogether. And her first thing that she said, this ghost, was, I just want to be part of the family. And so we actually lived in this house for 15 years with the spirit of the deceased lady in the house as part of the family. We used to go and have chats with her, using dowsing to talk to her and communicate with her. And we obviously, as you can imagine, it opens up a whole new aspect and a whole new way of seeing the world. But it wasn't like a bolt from the blue. It was, this journey has been a very gentle and slow process. And you find me here today with a YouTube channel and doing these, what I still regard as quite stressful live interviews. So yeah, fire away.
Outstanding. So when you got into the journey of dowsing, so at the start, what was it? Did you see people around you? Did they come and connect to that ghost, and that was the inspiration for you to then learn it? How did you learn the dowsing skills, and what was the process in that?
Yeah, I mean, so what was happening was that just before we actually met our spirit, and the lady's name was called Jane. So the spirit, the guardian energy, as she actually turned out to be, she's a guardian aspect, and we'll talk a little bit about that maybe later on. So Jane was present, and the dowsers that came in to speak with her and to dig out, find out what was going on in the house, they used dowsing. So what was obvious to me was that I was going to have to learn to use dowsing in order to communicate with Jane, with the spirit of the deceased lady. So really, things transpire that it's there's an obvious path. You have to take certain choices and make certain choices in order to proceed along a certain path. And it was obvious that that's what I was going to have to do. So what I did was to copy the way that these ladies had been talking with Jane. So at the same time, I had got into contact, as my chronology gets a little bit confused around this because it is a little while ago and I am getting old. But I had made contact with Hamish Miller, who was a wonderful gent down in Cornwall, who was an expert dowser. I was given a book of his by somebody that, you know, had come across his rather kind of pivotal book, which is called The Sun and the Serpent. And that story is about him and his fellow author, Paul Broadhurst, tracing the earth energy lines across the south of England. They go from Marazion in Cornwall across to Suffolk. And these are the Michael and Mary lines. They go through Glastonbury, they go through Avebury. These are major earth energy lines. And Hamish's story about their 10 years that they spent dowsing those lines is inspirational. And so I had connected with Hamish by asking him about dowsing because, you know, this book arrives and there was like, well, I've got to make contact with this guy. You know, you just make these decisions. And so Hamish was instrumental and pivotal in my development from that stage for the next 7 years or so, really. And we can talk a little bit about the work that I did with him as well, if you like. But I'm not sure if that actually answers your question, Dale, to be
Yes,
quite frank.
it does. I was intrigued of how you got on into this journey. And so before dowsing, was there any connection to spirit going on in kind of the background, or was it this house kind of was that I'd say catalyst for the change of you to have your awakening in a sense, if those are the right words to describe it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the house is the catalyst, and it definitely was an awakening. It was just a rather gentle awakening, not like some that are occurring these days where people really get hammered over the head by spirit and they're forced to wake up, and it can be quite a shock. But no, yeah, you know what I mean. My experience of spirit beforehand, virtually zero. I mean, I was brought up in a high church, so I was dragged along to church every Sunday by my parents, who insisted that I went with them to church. I thought that was incredibly boring and tedious. Obviously, as I got older, I got involved in sort of serving and all this sort of stuff. And again, that was pretty boring and tedious as well. But it was quite a nice bunch of people that, you know, were there. So I had the occasional precognitive dream when I was in my early 20s, when I was at film school and this sort of thing. So there were times where I literally would experience in a similar way to deja vu, but far more strongly, because I dreamt something, and then the next day that 2 minutes or so actually played out. And that's about the limit of my sensitivity at that stage. My wife had more experiences with it. She'd actually been she'd spent some time in a house where she was actually kicked out of bed by a spirit that just didn't like her being there, and she literally felt the hands and the feet on her back pushing her out of the bed that she was in. So needless to say, she simply left that room and slept elsewhere for the night. But no, I mean, neither of us, apart from those sort of instances, had any kind of contact with spirit beforehand. But the thing is, what's really interesting about the way that it came into our lives was that when these three ladies came into the house, and I often say that they were like the three witches from Macbeth as they came in, and they followed their dowsing rods out to the back of the house where this spirit energy really used to kind of reside at the time. But when we were being told, when my wife and I were being told about the spirit, about Jane, about her presence and what she was doing there, it seemed the most natural thing in the world. It seemed like, yeah, of course, that explains it all. That explains the flashing light bulbs. That explains why blah, 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 blah. And it was like, yeah, okay, that's fine. I get that. And so it was a very natural process, but it was also one of those times where you think, why am I feeling like that? Because It's like, why didn't I react with, dear God, what's going on here? This is ridiculous. Get out of my house now. So in itself, there are interesting questions to be asked about these sort of processes of how the subtle energies actually work with us and work and infiltrate into us and manifest in this perceived reality that we find ourselves.
Outstanding. Laura, have you got anything you want to ask or add to that?
Yeah, just quickly, because I've got a lot of background noise here just at this moment. So I've not met a dowser for ghosts before, which I find intriguing. So show me how, or tell me how the rods help in that, because I've only ever doused for like earth energies and things like that.
Yeah.
I've not, which is obviously the usual use of a dowsing rod.
Yeah.
So how did it come about that you use a rod to do that, or do you use a pendulum at all in that? I'll just turn off my audio now.
No, that's fine. You can use both, Laura. Look, so if we use one rod, we will get a positive response. That's a yes, right? So you recognize that. So when you're looking for earth energy, you would ask, let's say, show me the closest, most powerful earth energy center in this room, and it'll go over there. So it'll point, and that's how you're used to using dowsing. So if I'm having a conversation with you as a human being, I can hold the dowsing rod and I can ask questions, and it'll give me a yes, as yes, of course you can do that. So we can do that, and we can ask questions, and we can get that it happens because the dowsing is a part of us as a human process. So you can use a rod or you can use a pendulum. It doesn't matter which. The dowsing as a process appears to work simply by the fact that what we're doing is accessing the intuitive self, and the intuitive self will go wherever we send our intention. So if our intention is to find earth energy, then that's what we're kind of ratcheting into and going, right, connect with that. So therefore the dowsing, the information is given back to us. Our physiology on a subconscious level responds to the information that is there, is present. It comes through into still subconscious movements in the hands and arms. That affects that rod or pendulum to give us the response. So it's in that sense, it's not magic. And actually, this is what cynics and critics say. Well, dowsing can't work because it's the ideomotor effect. And the ideomotor effect is exactly what I just described, which is the subconscious processing of information coming out. So the rod and the pendulum are really acting as antennas to indicate, or rather a meter they're the meter needle that show us that yes, we've got a response, we've got a intuited answer. What you'll find is that a lot of very sensitive people, the people that have been born with the sensitivity to connect innately from birth and have grown up with it, so their world is a very different world, it's a very different way of processing, they find that dowsing actually inhibits their sensitivity. So because what they're doing then is trying to figure out, well, how, what answer am I getting? Whereas actually what you need to do is to relax and just chill and just allow. And therefore most people that use dowsing are not as sensitive as the real sensitives, right? Does that make sense? So it's a very clunky method and clunky way of accessing your intuition, but it can really work, and it can really help the sensitives when they understand what they're doing with it and how it fits with their sensitivities, by enabling them to actually get very, very good positive yes, no's and guidance when they're struggling with something that they maybe are losing a little bit of contact with, and look, kind of like, I want to get some additional help with that. So it is a really useful tool.
And so for the dowsing itself, when you were getting into this, what made you want to kind of have your career based on dowsing? What did it do for you in your own personal life? What inspired you to have your YouTube channel and kind of expand in the knowledge of it? Because I find it so fascinating, because the stuff, when I watch your videos, there's no ego there. It's just all about the data, all about trusting yourself. And I really do appreciate you coming on the show, because I've been wanting to have you on for a while. So what was it like for you? What made you want to do this kind of as a career and push it and spread the message in a way?
Well, that's exactly it, Dale. It's that the last bit of that. It's spread the message, because this is not a career choice, right? I mean, what I do is, this is not a career choice. If I had a choice, I would be pottering in the garden, planting runner beans and ignoring the world. That would be my career choice. But I can't finance what I want to do, right? You know, by pottering in the garden. The other aspect is, what happened was that, you know, over the years that we lived with Jane in that house, I was being drawn into the world of exploring earth energy, trying to understand earth energy, and trying to understand actually what was happening in my life, in my world, because there were several occasions in those early days where I definitely thought I was losing the plot. I thought I was going mad. I thought I was having a nervous breakdown. Interestingly, one of the things that helped me understand that I wasn't was the fact that my brother, 2 years older than me, at the time, he was actually sectioned under the Mental Health Act. He had been becoming bipolar, and he got to a stage where he basically became psychotic. And what was happening to him, I could look at and say, look, there are some similarities in how he was experiencing the world to how I'm now experiencing the world, which is a very different way to what I had done for the last 30 years. But I can see that Steve, bless him, has gone off the rails, whereas actually I'm still on the rails, but I'm having some wobbles. So the process of exploring what is this world about, how come I'd never seen this aspect of reality before, I wanted to explore it in a way that I found was mainstream. So therefore I got interested in the science of consciousness. What is neuroscience looking at? What do we know about consciousness that actually suggests in the quantum physics of reality that I can have the experiences that I'm having subjectively? And so I got very much into reading about the quantum physics of the way that reality manifests. Now, in all of that, what I was really trying to do was just kind of understand. But equally, what was happening was that the more I got into this stuff, the more I found it fascinating, and the less I was interested in earning a living from corporate video, because quite frankly, you know, although it's lovely to go out and shoot a JCB digger for a few days, you know, go out to Shanghai and have a couple of weeks in Shanghai or whatever, it wasn't actually as interesting as talking to Jane or trying to understand what's going on at a sacred site or any of that stuff. So I was losing interest in this, which actually meant that my ability and I was becoming more choosy with who I was working for. And I started working for people like Ecotricity. So there's a guy called Dale Vince who founded Ecotricity. It's the fourth biggest electrical supplier of energy electrical supplier in the UK. Dale Vince is an amazing guy, and I wanted to work for him because his head office was based fairly near where I was living at the time in the Forest of Dean. So I did start to work with him and produce corporate videos and things like that for him, and we did some wonderful work. So but underlying all this was the fact that I was changing, and I was finding more peace and fulfillment and happiness in life by being more connected to spirit, by being more connected to really who I fundamentally was. So I started giving workshops to people about dowsing, because I knew that if this simple act makes such a difference to me, then it will make a difference to other people. And, you know, my wife still goes on about the fact that there was a time where I actually said, all I want to do is to help people. And, you know, fundamentally, that's why I'm running the channel. The channel is a great way of getting free information. If people want to find out more about it, then there are kind of, you know, there's a small fee, $4.99 to join the channel, and we have a private community on there now for that. And that means that I can spend a little bit more time answering the questions and helping people along their spiritual journey as they find their truth. Because this is all just about understanding that the human being is not what we think we are. We are something that is far far more complex and so different to what we actually are educated to believe we are. And you know that. And so many people now are waking up to that idea. But what happens is that as we wake up to the idea and the realization that we are so much more than this physical being, then actually, because we're waking up to a process that is incredibly powerful, incredibly, well, it's all consuming, because basically we are simply an energy being working with energy to create our experience of being alive. And that's the fundamental. And that is so important. You know, that is so important. And that's why I do, and that's why I put myself through the stress of doing these things.
Incredible. Laura, have you got anything to ask or to ask?
Yeah, I'd love to know some of your experiences dowsing sacred sites and where you've been and what you found.
Well, the thing that I tend to say, Laura, is that a lot of the wow moments, a lot of the times when you come across things that are simply mind-blowing, or there are several things about it, because fundamentally what we're talking about is understanding that life and our reality and our experience, which applies in a magnified way when we go to a sacred site like Avebury, for example. What we're doing is we're connecting so deep, we're connecting far more deeply to our subjective experience, so our individual uniqueness, and we're connecting with that very strong energy that then goes straight into source. So what happens is that our individual experience becomes magnified, so that even the small things that might affect us deeply, you know, they are powerful. They are powerful. Whereas if I describe them to somebody else, or if you describe them to somebody else, if you went to a sacred site and you had a wow moment, which you undoubtedly will have had as somebody that does douse earth energy, then you would have had magical moments. And those magical moments are important to you. They're not necessarily important and significant and helpful to somebody else. So the key to all of this really is not so much about saying, oh, wow, that's I was about to swear. That's effing amazing. You know, did you see that angel, or did you see that amazing light, or did you see how that happened? It's actually because that doesn't necessarily mean anything to somebody else. Now, of course, you can have collective experiences. So you can have experiences where you know, the angels are present, and those people in the group that are sensitive enough to see and witness them simply by being there will do exactly that, and they can share that and get validation that that exchange happened. Because half the time, of course, you know, you think that didn't happen. That was my imagination. No, you know. So I mean, the thing is that where we are, just briefly, I will actually answer your question with an example. So I used to do a lot of work with a buddy of mine, a guy called Adrian Incledon-Weber. Adrian is a consummate dowser. He is author of a couple of books called Heal Your Home. And what he's done in Heal Your Home, these are basically manuals for clearing in a very deep level your home and your space. And the courses that I run are based on Adrian's books. He knows all about it. He takes part in it, and we discuss it all. So, and the thing was that Adrian's work actually is very similar to what I was learning from Hamish. So there's a whole raft of history that goes into this sort of process. Now, the point is that Adrian and I and some others, there are about 8 of us, I was going to say 6, but maybe 8 of us in a group, and we called ourselves at the time Avebury Spiritual Dowsers. We were living down south. We used to go and do some work at Avebury because, as you know, Avebury is such a fantastic site. And we were there on one occasion, collectively just following our intuition and doing a little ceremony and tuning in, and we were in a group in one of the quadrants of Avebury, and there was a tremendous feeling that we were being joined by other beings, and they 100% the way that I felt them, it was like a massive sort of almost like rhinoceros type character standing on two legs. It sounds like something out of Doctor Who, and quite frankly, I was thinking, well, that's bizarre, because that's like, what's that doing there? But there were several of these characters, and there were also in the group, as it was turning out, several fairly tall greys. So really what was going on there was that we were effectively joining the intergalactic family, and experiencing that sort of connection on that spiritual level. And really, if we jump and change our perspective about what we're talking about here, to a global one, then really what we're doing as a species now globally is actually reaching out and stepping out into the wider arena of the universe. And we can only do that if we actually are ready to join hands and hearts with the global family. We can't do that in the old energy of what was fundamentally something turns up, I'll shoot it. That we are not going to be allowed to step out and explore our greater selves as a human species with the old energy. So we have to be doing something to actually change and adjust and cohabit and understand that our real purpose is to express love and join with compassion to everything, and that affects the reality in which you find yourself. That's quite an answer. I don't know. Did that?
No, it's incredible. Laura, anything you want to add to that?
No, sorry. No, I love that. I mean, I was wondering how, I know you've explained how it's helped you on your personal journey. How do you think dowsing can contribute to people on their own spiritual quest, or their own quest to self-mastery, let's say?
Dowsing is brilliant as a door opener. So for people that are even just kind of vaguely thinking about it and might have heard about, well, spiritual aspect, or started meditating, it's a brilliant door opener to take you on a particular path. For people that are more advanced in terms of they're more experienced with either because they are more sensitive, so therefore they've lived their lives in a particular way, as I said before, they can use dowsing to kind of identify specifics, and the yes/no response is very, very useful. But really fundamentally, what I tend to help encourage people to do is to use it as a way of connecting to their guides, so to their full self in that sense. Because one of the things that I did around about 2010 was sort of just before Hamish Miller died in 2010. Leading up to that point, I was kind of developing the mediumistic side of me. I was trying to understand more about what that was all about. And I had a guide that came in, and some of the videos a couple of years ago, he would regularly pop up on YouTube. He would basically, because I got to a stage where I was doing trance mediumship, so he would actually come into the energy and he would talk. So he would be talking through me. I would be stepping back, and I was trying to understand that. And again, it was a logical process of trying to understand. What I've since realized is that, actually, it's not about this. It's about your heart, and it's about allowing and understanding, and everything actually stems from the heart. So for people that are more experienced at kind of living from the heart anyway, then actually dowsing can assist if they want to be looking at that development of relationship with your guides, or it can help with even things like, if you want to be developing a relationship to communicate with your pets, for example, animal communication, you can really start really nicely with dowsing. The thing is, and look, what I try to do is to encourage people to try, right? Because what happens is it's really important that people try and find out for themselves. There's no point in me saying, yes, go and get a dowser and, get that dowser to talk to your dog. What's the point of that? There's no point in doing that. You've got to do it yourself. You've got to understand that this is part of the path or the steps that actually the management upstairs, as Hamish used to call them, the management. It's just a lovely expression to kind of make it really kind of accessible. The management wants us to actually be experiencing what we are capable of experiencing in the subtle realms. And so dowsing, in whatever way you want to, dowsing is just about finding out information from the hidden realms, from the realms that are not immediately accessible through the five senses. So it takes you into that fifth and a half sense, if you like, or directly in relation to your guides. Those that are inclined to have a close relationship with their guides, it's a brilliant way to start. And I still say that mostly the role for dowsing is as a starter process. Some people stick with it all their lives, and that's great, and I do too. I mean, in fact, in a way, I went through, so I learned the dowsing, then went off to the mediumship thing, and then actually came back to the dowsing. And dowsing is the way that I access information. And quite frankly, I'm not a very good dowser. My success rate is probably about 80%. Sometimes I find, if I'm dowsing, I do house healing, and this is what I teach. Because this is all about relationship with the subtle realms, relationship with the management, and understanding how the energies of the management can be impacted and change the reality of a person, which is simply their experience. So there's all of these aspects to it. But if I'm dowsing somebody's house because they need help, because they've got something that is just not right in their house, sometimes I can be so bloody off that it's just embarrassing. It's just like, no, that wasn't good, that was not a good session, so I'll have to go back and revisit it or whatever. So it's not about being special, it's not about finding the hidden secret to life. What it's about is understanding that there's something else that we can try, and let's give it a go, because actually half the time you can get some magical results.
Outstanding. And I like that way that you're saying about that instant gratification when people are trying to kind of douse for that instant gratification answer. You're talking that being heart spaced aware and allowing you to talk through the heart is so important with it. I've got a question here from a lady in the chat. Hi, Amy. From Amy in the chat saying, can you find new sacred sites while dowsing?
Oh, that's a really good question. New sacred sites, that's wonderful. And what she probably means is, can we rediscover sacred sites that were used? And the answer is yes. In the same way as Hamish spent a lot of time dowsing landscape, you can see, basically it's all about intention. So you set the intention for looking for sacred sites. Now it gets, you have to ask the question, what is a sacred site? So you have to consider, what is it that you're looking for? And a sacred site, in the terms that Laura and I have been discussing and we've been talking about in the last half an hour or so, are fundamentally what we would recognize as probably standing stone circles. So these would be constructions that were put up sort of 4,000 years ago-ish. Neolithic standing stones, they're usually called. There's some fantastic ones around, especially up in Scotland. And so the reason that they are sacred sites is most likely because when humanity was nomadic, they would your tribes would travel across, be following the food source and all of this sort of stuff. They would come to a place that felt good. Now, what we know is that places that feel good usually have at least two crossing points of fairly major earth energy lines. Earth energy is absolutely critical to the way that we feel in our reality. So, and that can be reality in terms of human being, nature, or it can be in terms of the quantum being itself, right? I mean, I use those terms kind of interchangeably, but basically you've got the tribe finds a lovely place, and they'll settle there for a little while because it feels good and they got water nearby, and usually sacred sites have got water connected to them anyway. But what happens is that they would be tuning in because they're really in tune with nature at that time anyway. Thousands of years ago, we lived in harmony with nature, as the indigenous tribes do these days, and indigenous people. And so therefore, as you live in harmony and as you connect to the subtle energies, then actually what's happening is that it becomes a recognized process that is providing more power to that individual connection. So it's an individual connection from the human beings into the space. The sacred space, as it becomes, because it's used in ceremony, is powered up by our consciousness and our heart input. So when you go to a sacred site these days, like Avebury, you'll find that there are earth energy centers, which are basically power centers. They are powerful connecting points. When it's worked with in ceremony, which is the deliberate focused intent of the human being, then that power is increased. So there are various groups around the world that are currently rediscovering and reuniting and reinvigorating the earth energy network around the globe. And that's a good thing. That's great. That's fantastic. You know, this is the work that Hamish Miller started in the 80s. So, and people now are flooding to do it. The only word of caution that I say, and actually where I see my work fitting into all of this, is that actually what's important is the way that we connect to that earth energy. Because as I said earlier on, and I will come back to Amy's, can we find the sacred sites in a sec? But the important thing is that we do so with the integrity and the honesty and the absolute clarity of connecting at the highest level possible in the understanding of who we are and the understanding of what we're doing and the understanding of who the management are and what our place within the reality that we're creating. Because it's our choices that affect the reality that we experience. And there's no point in going in there ego-driven like some kind of, I'm the guru that does so, and creating merry hell, because
we've done many shows about this.
Yeah, right. Okay, but good.
The light workers.
So, and this is the thing, and this is the danger. I mean, we can joke about it and we can laugh at others, but equally, this is the big trap of discovering who we are and what we are as human beings, because our ego, which is the traditional energy that's kept us in this form, says, whoa, look at that, look how powerful I can be. And people, as in Star Wars, getting called to the dark side, can discover that the ego actually has a real trip on it, which is no good to anybody. So coming back to Amy's question, yes, you can find your own you can find new sacred sites that haven't been worked with very much for a long time, and there are hundreds of thousands of them. There are equally hundreds of sacred sites that are wonderful and could be visited and can be embraced. And what you'll find at every sacred site is a rather lovely guardian energy, the equivalent of which Jane was in our house. So every site has a guardian that you ask permission of. Can I enter this site? Douse, yes, no. 99% of the time they will say yes. If they say no, you wait 5 minutes and then ask again, and there'll be a reason why you couldn't go in the first time. So, but you can communicate. Those people that want to communicate with guides or with personality aspects of the subtle realms, you can just communicate, and you can use dowsing to do that. But yes, Amy, go off and find these wonderful sacred sites or create your own. Because because every home has an earth energy power center. Every home is basically permeated with earth energy, and by sitting in an open space, even by sitting on a balcony in a flat 50 floors up, if you want to do it outside on the balcony and just acknowledge the earth energy because it's there. And in doing that, you start to create that connection with that whole spiritual self that we've been talking about.
Outstanding. And we've got another question from Alfredo. What's your views on meditation on ley lines and vortexes?
Meditation is the absolute foundation stone of all of this work. So, meditation is crucial to being able to communicate and to sit in the energy and to assimilate the energy and to connect to the energy and to be everything that we've been talking about. So it's no good actually starting to dowse, pick up a dowsing rod and off you go, without actually also thinking, I need to spend some time just chilling, just being still, because the dowsing, you have to be still for the dowsing to work properly. You can't douse and get sensible results if you're not at a level of tranquility, because basically what we're talking about is the fact that the brainwave patterns change and they go into the meditative state. So when you're dowsing and getting good answers, you're in the meditative state. So the more you meditate during the day, the better, because your body is then more trained to do it. And going off to meditate on node points, which is crossing points of earth energy lines rather than ley lines, is brilliant, because you're accessing more effectively the energies of the management, because the veil is the thinnest at these sacred sites.
Outstanding. So your experience of your own meditations at sites, well, I'll just go off my personal experience. You're so right. It's that ability to be able to go and there's something called like a no time field, where you go into a place where you don't allow Roman numeral time to exist, and that's something I like to do at sacred sites, is go there without expectation or judgment or anything labeled on top of it, because in the past I have. And I've gone in there as a zealot, as a so-called light worker, thinking I was doing good, but in a sense I was just doing really wrong. And it is finding that being in tune with your heart, being in tune with the stillness as well, is very important, isn't it, Tim?
It is. The thing that is also fundamental to this, and one of my big hobby horse in all of this, is that we are our own individual unique universes. Okay, so Dale Tobin's universe is a very different time and place and energy to mine, completely and utterly, same as Laura's. So effectively, the fact that I'm aware at the moment of me, you, Laura, all of those, if we think of them as spherical energy beings, our universes, when we are formed, our being, right? So at the moment, those three spherical beings, those three universes are overlapping. This sort of illustration, this sort of sacred site geometry is quite significant in this process. So it's the overlapping of the universes and the sharing of the universes, the resonance of our individual universes, that is important. So when we go into a sacred site, so when you've gone into a sacred site, Dale, in the past, and you've gone in with the zealot to think of, I'm going to heal the world, this is me, I'm gonna do this, and you kind of like, oops, fall over. Yeah, right. Well, the fact is that actually what you're affecting is your own individual unique universe. And so there's a learning, there's a lesson in there. Your humility is being worked on by the management, because they are with us all the time, whether we like it or not, and whether we know it or not. So as I was saying earlier on, we've got hordes of people that are going to focus at nodal points and do the meditations and all the rest of it with good intent. And even if they do it with not good intent, what they're affecting is their individual unique universe. So again, we can't look at this world from the materialist point of view. What we're talking about when we're talking about spirituality and this experience of life as a spirit being human is looking at it absolutely from the fundamental non-materialist viewpoint. Now, the difference of that is that you're accessing all of the information from the point of view of whatever the experience is in that moment. But it is your experience because you're directly connected to source. It's not Laura's experience. And this is what we were saying earlier on. So in the human sense, when we look at it from the human perspective point of view, we say, well, Laura's experience was lovely, but it doesn't really mean much to me. that actually is only in my universe for that moment that I'm interacting and sharing information with Laura. So what we have in the world at the moment of 8 billion souls is 8 billion different universes co-resonating in the harmonic frequency. And if you look at the work of Paul Selig, he's a fantastic channel. Paul Selig talks about when he's written, he's channeled several. In fact, I don't know how many it is now. Is it 8 books or something? But they're channeled word for word and published word for word. And he's a brilliant channel. And what his guides are saying about what they're putting across in very complex terms is the fact that we're all living in harmony, in harmonics, and our experience of those harmonics varies moment to moment as we choose to express ourselves and be with the energy of the management or not. So what I talk about a lot, and really, as I say, my hobby horse, is the fact that moment to moment, our choices affect the reality that we experience for us. So if we choose moment to moment to live from the highest possible vibration and the greatest and the most, the best of the best possible vibration in harmony with the management, then that's the experience that we have. And we find that everybody we meet will be loving and wonderful, rather than, and also we're not living in a world of lack either when we're at that level. But what we've been living with individually, I can say for sure, I lived in a world of lack. 1998 was a world of lack and chaos. And what we've experienced by being detached from spirit is basically chaos, because our energy is down here, not deliberately maintaining the creative force of what we are as co-creators to create and experience the reality that's up there. That's where we can be. That's what we're doing now, is changing and adapting and addressing that.
Beautifully put. And Laura, do you want to add anything or any questions for Tim?
No, I love that. And I think really this goes along with what you're saying. In my experience, you create, or you have your own co-creation with the ancestors of that sacred place. And I do that. And I also have in the past used my dowsing rods to actually locate where there were standing stones, which are gone, which is and there's so many that are missing now and have been buried and knocked down and so on. I mean, Avebury is a wonderful place to go. I agree. How do you feel about were you to live in these places of high power? Do you think the energy surge is too much for us to handle, really?
Well, I mean, when Adrian and I used to do a lot of work at Avebury, Adrian particularly always used to express the how do people live in this space? But really, again, it comes back to this uniqueness of the universe, of each individual universe, because every single person is utterly unique. Some people can handle it. Some people don't even, some people can live in a place like Avebury and not even notice that there's all of this stuff going on. It's just, that's their energy, that's their world, that's their universe. So everybody has to be looked at completely and utterly as a unique individual. And that really, I guess, out of any of the learnings that I've had over these years, especially as I've done more and more house healing work, is you just accept that each person is absolutely unique. And when we start to work on the subtle energies of a place and person, then we're working with that individual energy. It's you can't bring your own opinions and biases into that space, because that's not what it's about.
And we'll have to wrap up today's show. I'd like to invite you on again, Tim, because I feel like we've only started to.
Sure. Yeah,
we've only started this.
That's fine. That's absolutely happy.
And any last words before we go, Laura or Tim? It's been an absolute pleasure, and it's so inspiring. You've got a lot of knowledge, and what I like about you is the understanding of the feeling of who you are. You know who you are, you trust who you are, and it's inspiring to see.
Well, that's very kind. That's very nice. That is really the journey of life, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Thanks, Tim. I really enjoyed that. I love all this unseen world discussion,
No,
and how you use dowsing on a spiritual path as well, because there's many dowsers who don't talk about the spirituality related to dowsing, and it's purely earth energy. And really, as you say, it's the connection with the unseen. So I love that, and I'd love to come on next time, please, Dale, when that we do this, so we can. There's so much more to talk about. So thanks, Tim. It's been lovely to meet you. Thanks, Dale.
And hopefully we'll get Andrew on. He was commenting on some of the stuff on YouTube, so I'll see if Andrew wants to come on, and Matty, and we can get a few more, because it's been really good. I love these shows where I just want to listen. I was I've talked a lot, and like, yes, I could just listen and learn and open myself up. So how can people get a hold of you as well, for those wanting to explore more of your work?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the best place really is to head off to YouTube and do a search for me on there. So I think these days you can do @Knights Rose. So that's KNIS. No, it's not. KNIGHTSROSE. Knights, as in Knights of Old, and Rose. One word, @Knights Rose. That should find me these days, I think. Or Tim Walter Dowser. Pop that into the search engine, or go to www.knightsrose.com, which is a good place to start as well.
Outstanding. And how can people get hold of you, Laura, for sessions, and what have you got going on at the moment session wise for people to?
Yeah, so I do individual shamanic self-mastery training on Zoom or Skype, whatever your platform you want. So we can do that either, you can just have an hour taster session, or buy the whole course, Riding the Winds of Change. So twofeathersmedicine.com and Laura twofeathers@gmail.com, and 2 is with the number 2. So lovely. And you know that I'm with Dale and Matty and Andrew every Thursday on a live show as well. So
wonderful. And yeah, thanks, you, sister, for coming on as well. And if anybody wants any psychic surgery sessions, I'm available. I've got a lot more appointments coming up. I've been very busy, but I've got quite a few spaces in like the middle of December. Then I stop on round about the 18th for Christmas break. So yeah, thank you for watching the Talking Stick Show. It's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you.